Perfect. So, welcome everyone to our new podcast at ITSS Verona. Today, we are lucky to have with us Dr. Yusuf from Pakistan, and we are trying to make sense of the recent clashes between India and Pakistan. So, we want to understand more of his perspective on what happened and also on the role of other actors like China. So, just a couple of words to introduce you, Dr. Moeed Yusuf. He's one of the leading scholars in Pakistan of his generation, and he's also a professor of political science and international relations at many institutions like the Boston University, George Washington University, and Lahore University. He's also one of the, if not the youngest, actually, national security advisor in Pakistan. So definitely today we are in good hands to make sense of the recent events. So Sandra, if that's okay with you, I will start with the first question.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we are trying also because it's usually our focus of research. So, we are curious to understand more of the role of China in the recent clashes. And so, Dr. Yusuf, one question we have for you. To what extent do you think the role of Chinese weapons in the conflict, and I'm thinking about the fighter jets and also the radar systems, to what extent do you think they played a crucial role in shifting the strategic balance with India? Do you think it was something more symbolic, or there was a significant shift in power?
Well, I mean, I think, look, if you're interested in research, let me just say that it's a bad way to do research if you draw a conclusion based on the outcome. You've got to understand the premise, and the premise is that both India and Pakistan actually are arms importers, large arm importers. Throughout their history, they've actually depended on advanced technology platforms. Pakistan mostly on the US in the past, and India on the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and then still continuing with Russia, even though it is a close US and Western partner now in terms of countering China. So this isn't new. I mean, that's the platforms that they have. Of course, they have domestic production, but most of it is imported. You've got Chinese technology, you've got American technology in Pakistan in the Air Force. You've got Russian. You've got multiple other technologies on the Indian side. French Rafale, of course, as you've seen, that went down. So I'm not quite sure. I think the West is a bit shaken, it seems, because of the, if you will, coming of age of Chinese technology and an empirical test during a crisis moment. But the Chinese had been developing this technology, and it was known that it was, par excellence. Is it better or worse than French technology or American technology? I think that's not the right question to ask. Crises have many, many variables. There is, who's flying the plane is more important than anything else, what your strategy is. The Indian Air Force has been in a mess for a long time. Everybody knows that. And I think it's shown now with, a half a dozen planes down. So technology is important. Technology is always going to be important, but I wouldn't take this far enough to say that, just because of a platform, the performance was what it was. In 2019, the last crisis that Pakistan and India went through, there was an aerial dogfight at that time as well. Pakistan brought down an Indian aircraft, Indian jet, which was Russian. And Pakistan did not use Chinese technology at that time. So I think there's something more than technology going on here. But it's very clear that the Western countries would have to look at Chinese technology very, very closely now, because they're clearly, at par, if not ahead of the curve, it seems, not only from this crisis, but otherwise. But it in no way, to my mind, undermines the excellence and credibility of Western technology across the board. I mean, I think it's just one crisis and a poor performance, expectedly poor performance, frankly, by the Indian Air Force.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf. And so, one more question related to what you're saying. One argument I read on many Western media is that China actually came out as the winner in the clashes in terms of perception, because their weapons never really performed publicly this way. So it was the first time it was a sort of platform, and China gained in credibility in terms of technology and weapon capability. And so do you agree with this statement that China was the winner in perception? And also, do you think we can expect more weapons sales in the global south after these events?
Yeah, I don't know what it means to be a winner in a crisis of this nature, frankly. I think we should never be gloating about any, any such sort of crisis in any way. But in as far as China hasn't fought a war since its war with Vietnam, I think that's true. I mean, this is the first real life experiment. Western technology has been used in many, many theaters. Chinese hadn't. So in that sense, yes. I mean, if you're in the arms industry, perhaps you're part of that military-industrial complex, then maybe that's the view you would take. I think it's also, please remember, it's not only aircraft, but there are other technologies also that were at play in this crisis, which perhaps performed well as well. So I think the West would be looking at this very closely. The Chinese would be studying this very closely, as as is expected. Sales, yes, I think so. I mean, in the global south, there's been this big question on whether to go for Western technology or whether the Chinese are at the point where the global south should invest precious resources into Chinese technology. I think this probably, in that sense, would give the Chinese arms industry a boost. I think that's the sense I get.
Thank you very much. Sandra, on to you. I know you have other questions, so please.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, Doctor, for your time. In your recent article for the Balfour Center, you described the India-Pakistan relationship as dangerously reliant on external crisis management. What do you see as the long-term risks of the model? Are there viable alternatives?
I mean, the only viable alternative is the only sensible alternative, which is bilateral. The Cold War experience very clearly shows that despite all the misgivings, the US and Soviet Union created dependable crisis management mechanisms, arms control treaties, escalation control mechanisms, hotlines that worked. I mean, otherwise, perhaps the world wouldn't have been what it is today if Khrushchev and Kennedy weren't in touch during the Cuban Missile Crisis one way or another. And so that has escaped South Asia. Partly the irony is it's probably escaped South Asia because the third party, the United States and other third party capitals have become intrinsic to the crisis management regime, the expectations and the predictions of how a crisis would play out. Understand that during the Cold War, you had the two strongest powers in the world competing and involved in crises. Here you've got regional powers, and there are other stronger parties available in the world to come in and counsel, to give inducements, to give face savers, to threaten, whatever the case may be. So it's a very different model of crisis management. Regional powers have never been at each other's throat like India and Pakistan have. But since 1998, when they tested nuclear weapons, both have continued to have a trilateral crisis management arrangement with US and other third parties being the third pillar. It's not reasonable, it's not sustainable perhaps in some ways, it's risky because you can have a lot of miscommunication, misunderstandings. These third parties have their own equities, even though they've come in and tried to ensure de-escalation because of the risk of nuclear war. There are all sorts of question marks, all sorts of crisis communication mishaps that can happen. And we've been close in the past. So, I mean, the best thing is a conversation directly to ensure robust escalation control between India and Pakistan. But let me just say this entire business of crisis management, when you have two neighbors that are nuclear powers, and believing that this will always work out for the better is living in fool's paradise. Once you're in a fast-paced crisis, you can never guarantee the outcome no matter what you do. The only sensible way to do this is for India and Pakistan to ensure that they don't enter a crisis. And that can only happen if they're talking, if there is dialogue, and if there's resolution of their deeper issues that cause crises. A principle among them is the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir, which is a UN Security Council recognized international dispute. And so there, I think the Indians, I can't understand their calculus at this point. I think they're making a mistake by constantly shunning any possibility of dialogue. It doesn't help the US, it doesn't help the West, it doesn't help China. Nobody wants India and Pakistan to be in a crisis every couple of years, given the nuclear risks. So they must be nudged to sit down, talk, and resolve their issues.
Thank you so much. Another question. You highlight the risk of regional crises escalating due to a global distraction or disengagement. In the current geopolitical climate, the US focus divided and China's role shifting, how do you see the external security environment shaping future India-Pakistan confrontation?
I think we're going from bad to worse. You see, the problem is, my sense is that India has gotten into this mindset where it feels that it's too strong, too buoyant, and rising in a way that it doesn't need to deal with the Pakistan issue on an even keel. I think it's tried this with its entire region of South Asia. It's got no neighbor that's happy with it right now. And this crisis may have been a rude awakening for India, and that's why they've sort of left this crisis so dissatisfied. Maybe some say that Israel was playing on their mind, and they thought that they could go in and quote unquote punish Pakistan. And the response they've gotten, I think, has reminded everybody that we're talking of two nuclear powers here. It's not good for anyone. I mean, as I said, getting into these crisis moments, and so ultimately you have to find a way where India and Pakistan can live like civilized neighbors. Now, the international environment is such that it's so unpredictable. You don't know where things are going to be every couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months. And so, will the US be able to come in into the next crisis and broker a ceasefire again? Will the Chinese line up with the Americans to support that like they've done in the past? Will other capitals of influence be able to play a role? Will India see Pakistan as a bigger threat and try and convince the US to team up as India, US versus China, Pakistan? Because one of the things this crisis has done, and that's where I think the Indians got it wrong, is that it's only brought China and Pakistan closer, which is a nightmare scenario for India. I mean, their opposition leader, Rahul Gandhi, said on the floor of the parliament that India's most important strategic imperative is not to allow China and Pakistan to become one when it comes to the threat from India, and that's what this crisis, in his words, may have done. I think that's going too far, but yes, I mean, at the end of the day, that's not a good situation for India. I don't think Pakistan wants to be in a crisis all the time, and I don't think the US wants to be doing India's bidding in a way that it has to come in and become part of the conflict per se. So overall, I think the international fluidity makes it more unpredictable, more dangerous. There are more question marks and uncertainties, and I don't think anybody is confident about the next crisis playing out and easing out the way this one ultimately did.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf. Would you have time for a last question? Couple of minutes?
Sure.
So this is again going back to the battle of perception, because one thing we noticed reading different sides, different media, is that there was a sort of battle of narratives between India and Pakistan. One side, for example, inflating the number of casualties. Then we also saw a lot of videos generated by artificial intelligence. So my question is, do you think we reached a point where perception is perhaps sometimes more important than reality in this conflict? Because this was my impression of looking at the media.
Yeah, I think what you've said is a truism across the world for everything, not just this crisis. Unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, we're in a world where perception is more important than reality. Truths are created. Every truth can be made whichever way you want to look at it. And this is just the beginning. When the AI algorithms, really become better than they are today, we won't know what the truth is. So in some ways, this business of strategic communication is going to transform into fake news more than anything else. So there, I don't think we should be surprised. It's going to be more and more. What I think you need to note, though, is that there was a stark, clear difference between how the Pakistani media reacted and how the Indian media reacted. I don't need to say this. You can look at Western publications. You can look at places like the New York Times and others who were literally berating the Indian media for creating a fictional world. For days they said no plane has come down. They were one of the most celebrated Indian journalists saying Karachi, Pakistan's biggest port, has been captured, it's been burnt, it's Pakistan is falling. If you looked at Indian media for those 3 or 4 days, it was really a very good fictional Hollywood movie. sensible people simply losing their mind. And so I think there has to be a study, and I'd love for you to consider interviewing some Indian media people from the other side. Even people from within the Indian media industry came out and really, criticized the way the Indian media handled this crisis. I mean, it was just mind-boggling. The kind of perception or the kind of depiction of the crisis or Pakistan they were creating. It's not new. In 2019, when the crisis happened, the Modi government did the same thing. And I think there is something deeper here. The question to ask is, how can a media of such a large country and such a large media actually be swayed by a government to do its bidding 100% of the time? How can you get away with sensible people just lying through their teeth and the country having to live with that? And there I think there's something ideological about it. I think, Carlotta, that's the question to ask. Is India and the Indian government now imposing an ideology that is so restrictive, that is so exclusive, that to remain relevant, you have to be speaking a certain language, and that language is bashing everybody that the government doesn't like, creating a fictional world in a crisis, which, the entire world saw through it. So Pakistan didn't have to do much to point out. It was really mind-boggling. I've been a national security advisor of my country. I'm still not one of those who is going to gloat about this. I just feel sorry. I mean, you've got 1.5 billion people being misled by maybe 100 people who feel that it's not good for their politics to tell the truth. Truth number one is that India did attack Pakistan based on a terrorist attack that they had no evidence for whatsoever. The truth number two is that it is not good to be in a military conflict in a nuclear environment, no matter who wins or loses. Truth number three is that Indian planes came down. India didn't have a good time in the crisis, but the depiction is very different. Truth number four is that India has unilaterally said that it's going to not honor the only water dividing treaty the world has seen that guarantees water for 250 million Pakistanis. This is a World Bank brokered Indus Water Treaty that has been in effect since 1960. And India has just come out and said, we don't care, we're not going to do this anymore. And its officials are saying we're going to starve Pakistan of water. Do you think that 250 million people in a nuclear country are going to starve of water and the country won't react? So it's, the other thing, truth number five perhaps, is that the Indian Prime Minister has said that the ceasefire is just a pause, we are not done, we'll be back at conflict. Now tell me, is this sensible? Is this reasonable in a nuclear environment? So, I think Pakistan's made it clear. We want to talk, we want to resolve issues. But if India is going to use force, don't expect that there is going to be silence from the other side. I think that's the message. It's unfortunate. I do not think any military confrontation is good in such an environment. But unfortunately, Pakistan's hand was forced last time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf. Indeed, more food for thought for the future. Sandra, would you like to add something else, or?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you
Or
for
this
It's a pleasure. Thank you very
time.
much.
It was really a pleasure having
Thank
you
you.
with us. Thank you.
You
Thank
take
you
care,
so much.
please.